The doctor slipped a folded note into my purse as I left the office, his fingers trembling like leaves in the wind. "Don't go home yet, Mrs. Jenkins," he whispered, his eyes filled with something that looked like fear. "Read this in the car. And then pray for wisdom." On that cold October afternoon in Meadowbrook, Tennessee, I didn't know that this yellowed piece of paper would change everything. That it would reveal not only a betrayal planned by my own family, but a secret hidden for 50 years, a secret my late husband took to his grave, thinking he was protecting me. My name is Dorothy Mae Jenkins. I'm 72 years old, and for 45 years I raised a son who wasn't my own, but whom I loved as if he were. Joseph came into my life when he was just 3 years old. An abandoned boy whom my husband Robert and I adopted after years of praying for a child. I gave everything for him, my dreams, my youth. Every penny I earned working double shifts in the textile mill. But what was written in that note, what I would discover in the days that followed, would change not only how I saw my family, but how I saw my entire life. If you're watching this, subscribe to this channel now to discover stories that reveal hidden truths and show that it's never too late to start over with dignity. Because what happened after that note will make you question everything you think you know about family, loyalty, and the secrets we keep for love. Dr. William Bradford's waiting room smelled of antiseptic mixed with that artificial flower scent hospitals use to mask the smell of disease and death. I was there for my annual checkup, the same one I'd been going to religiously for 23 years, ever since Dr. Bradford opened his office on Main Street in Meadowbrook. It was an ordinary Tuesday in October, the kind of day when the leaves begin to fall from the oak trees and you can feel winter approaching like a distant promise. I had donned my best blue dress, the one Robert always said, matched my eyes and tied my gray hair into a simple bun. At 72, I still cared about appearances, still believed that dignity began with how you presented yourself to the world. "Mrs. Jenkins," the nurse called after me, and I followed her down the narrow hallway to the exam room. She was new, a young girl I didn't recognize. Before, it was always Martha, who had worked with Dr. Bradford for 15 years. "Where's Martha?" I asked, and the young nurse smiled politely. "She retired last month, ma'am. I'm Cindy." Another change. It seemed like everything was changing lately, as if the world was preparing for something I couldn't yet see. Dr. Bradford entered the room a few minutes later, carrying my medical record, a thick folder containing decades of information about my health. He was 58 years old, with hair starting to gray at the temples, and that calm, professional manner that small-town doctors develop after years of caring for the same families. But today, there was something different about him. His hands trembled slightly as he checked my blood pressure. He avoided direct eye contact, his eyes fixed on the meter as if he were reading Holy Scripture. And when he spoke, his voice sounded strained, like an overstretched guitar string about to snap. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Jenkins," he said, but it didn't sound like it had before. "Your labs are perfect. Your heart is as strong as someone 20 years younger. Your blood pressure is ideal. Your cholesterol is excellent. You have many, many good years ahead of you." He emphasized that many years in a strange way, as if he were trying to tell me something between the lines. As I stood to leave, grabbing my brown leather bag, the same one Robert had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary, I felt Dr. Bradford approaching from behind. Suddenly, as I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, he discreetly placed a folded piece of paper at the bottom, between my embroidered handkerchief and my wallet. The movement was so quick, so stealthy, that I almost didn't notice, like a magician performing a trick, or a spy passing on secret information. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Jenkins," he said loudly, with that forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But then, more quietly, almost in a whisper that only I could hear, he added, "And remember, family isn't always what it seems. Sometimes what's closest to us is what we hide the most." The words sent a shiver down my spine, like icy fingers running down my spine. What did he mean? Why had he given me that note so secretly? And why did his eyes look so scared? I left the office with my heart pounding, each pulse echoing in my ears like distant drums. The October light seemed brighter than it should have been, almost blinding. The air smelled of fireplace smoke and ripe apples, the sense of autumn in Meadowbrook, scents that normally brought me comfort. But today, everything felt wrong. as if the world had turned upside down while I was in that exam room. During the taxi ride I hadn't driven since my dizzy spell last year, 1,000 thoughts raced through my head like dry leaves in a whirlwind. Dr. Bradford had never acted so strangely. He was a serious, professional man, the kind who chooses his words carefully. He'd known my family since Joseph was a teenager, had treated Robert during his final illness, had held my hand at the funeral, and had told me that time would heal the pain. Why would he be giving me secret messages now? What did he know that I didn't? The taxi stopped at the corner of my street, Maple Street, where I lived for 45 years, in that white Victorian house with the wide porch and rose garden. The house where I raised Joseph, where I buried my husband and my thoughts and memories, where I planned to spend my final years in peace. But something made me hesitate before getting out of the taxi. A strange feeling in my stomach, like when you know you've forgotten something important but can't remember what. "Can you take me to the church park?" I asked the driver, a young man named Marcus, whom I knew from the congregation. "I need a moment to think." Marcus nodded without asking questions. One of the perks of living in a small town is that people respect your privacy, and led me to the small park next to Grace Community Church, where Robert and I were married 52 years ago. I sat on a bench beneath a centuries-old oak tree, the same one where Robert proposed to me on a spring evening in 1971. The leaves fell around me like golden tears, and the silence was broken only by the distant songs of birds and the whisper of the wind. With hands shaking not from the cold, but from anticipation mixed with fear, I opened my purse and searched for the note. My fingers touched the folded paper, rough to the touch, and for a moment I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to throw that paper away, go home, cook dinner for Joseph and his family like I always did on Tuesdays, and pretend everything was fine. But another part of me, the part that always knew something was wrong, but ignored for years, needed to know the truth. I unfolded the paper slowly, as if opening a letter that might contain news of a death. Dr. Bradford's handwriting was hurried, nervous, very different from his usual precise, medical writing. "Ezra Jenkins way. I apologize for this unorthodox approach, but there's no other way. Yesterday, your daughter-in-law Rebecca, and her son, Joseph, came to my office with a proposal that kept me up all night. They asked me to certify that the lady suffers from advanced dementia and needs to be admitted to a nursing home immediately. They offered me money, a considerable amount, to falsify medical documents declaring her mental incompetence. When I refused, Rebecca became aggressive. She told me that she had lived too long and that they couldn't wait any longer." Joseph remained silent, but he didn't contradict her. "Ms. Jenkins, your exams are perfect, your mind is crystal clear, but they're planning something. Don't go home yet, seek legal help, and above all, protect yourself. There's something else I need to tell you, something about your late husband Robert that could change everything, but I can't write it here. Come to my office tomorrow at 7 a.m., before regular business hours. I'll be alone. May God protect you, Dr. William Bradford." Have you ever felt that exact moment when your entire world crumbles? When everything you believed to be true turns out to be a carefully constructed lie? The words on the paper began to blur as tears filled my eyes. Not from sadness, not yet, but from something deeper. Betrayal. The worst betrayal a mother can feel. My son, the boy I raised, the boy I fed, the boy I held when I had nightmares, the boy I taught to pray, was conspiring to take away my freedom, my dignity, my very mind. And Rebecca, the daughter-in-law, I treated like a daughter, who I embraced when she had no family, who I helped raise Sarah, my granddaughter. Had she said I'd lived too long, that they can't wait any longer? Why wait any longer? Because I'm dead. Because of my inheritance. And what did Dr. Bradford mean about Robert? What secret had my dead husband been keeping? I sat on that bench for almost an hour, the note crumpled in my hands, as the October sun slowly sank below the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple. The church bell rang 5, and I knew Joseph and Rebecca would be starting to wonder where I was. But for the first time in 45 years, I didn't care what they thought. I grabbed my cell phone, the smartphone Sarah taught me to use last year, and dialed a number I had saved in my contacts but had never used. Margaret Sullivan, a lawyer, my distant cousin who lived in Nashville. "Margaret," my voice was broken, unrecognizably. "It's me, Dorothy. I need your help. Something terrible is happening, and I think I'm going to need a lawyer." On the other end of the line, Margaret was silent for a moment. Then, in that firm, professional voice I remembered from our last family gathering, she said, "Tell me everything, cousin, and don't leave out any details." As the sun disappeared and the shadows lengthened in the park, I told her about the note, about my family, about the fear that was beginning to grow in my chest like a poisonous seed. And she told me something that would change everything. "Dorothy, you need to disappear for a few days. Right now, don't come home. Don't tell anyone where you are. And tomorrow morning at 7, we'll go to Dr. Bradford's office together and find out what this secret is. But my house, my things. Joseph will be worried, double quotes, Joseph," Margaret interrupted, her voice hard as steel, "is planning to commit you against your will. He's not worried about you, Dorothy. He's worried about your will." The truth of those words hit me like a blow. And in that moment, sitting under the oak tree where Robert promised me eternal love, I made the hardest decision of my life. I wouldn't go home, not yet. First, I needed to find out the whole truth about my family's conspiracy, about the secret Robert had kept, about who I really was beyond being a mother, a grandmother, and a widow. I needed to find out if Dorothy Mae Jenkins had the courage to fight for herself after spending her entire life fighting for everyone else. Margaret arrived at the park in less than an hour, driving her black sedan as if she were running away from something. Maybe she was running away from normality, from her comfort zone, from that instinct that tells us not to get involved in other people's problems. But family is family, and Margaret has always been the type to leave no one behind. "Get in the car," she said, opening the passenger door. There was no hug, no empty words of comfort, just action. And in that moment, I loved my cousin more than ever. We drove in silence along the highway that cut through Meadowbrook, leaving behind the familiar lights of the town, the places I'd spent my entire adult life. The fabric store where I'd bought materials to make Joseph's clothes as a child. The bakery where Robert took me for coffee every Saturday. The library where I taught Sarah to read when she was 5. Every place was a memory, and every memory was now tainted with betrayal. "Where are we going?" I asked finally, as we left the city limits. "Riverside Inn," Margaret replied, her eyes fixed on the road. "It's a discreet hotel 40 minutes from here. No one in your family will think to look for you there. We'll register under my name, pay cash, and you'll have time to think." "Margaret, I didn't bring anything. Not clothes, not my medicine, not, we'll get you what you need tomorrow. Right now, the important thing is that you're safe." She gave me a look that mixed concern and determination. "Dorothy, do you understand the gravity of what's happening? If they manage to commit you under the guise of dementia, you'll lose everything. Your rights, your property, your autonomy. And once you're in a nursing home, it's almost impossible to get out." My stomach churned. But why? I've always given them everything. The house is in Joseph's will. My pension from Robert goes to them when I die. My savings, everything. Why can't they wait? Margaret sighed, the heavy sigh of someone who's seen this story before. Debt, probably. Greed, impatience. Sometimes people can't wait for their natural inheritance. They want it now, and they're willing to destroy anyone who stands in their way. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. My own son. The boy who woke screaming from nightmares and I soothed by singing hymns. The young man I helped pay for college by working double shifts at the factory. The man who cried on my shoulder when Rebecca suffered a miscarriage. How does one get to this point? How does love turn into ... this? Have you ever wondered at what exact moment someone you love decides you're worthless? That your life has become an obstacle to their plans? The Riverside Inn was a low red brick building hidden among trees, the kind of place you only find if you're looking for it. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain, barely glanced at us when Margaret checked us in. The room was simple but clean to twin beds with flowery bedspreads, an old TV, and a tiny bathroom that smelled of pine bleach. The curtains were thick and completely blocked out the streetlights. A perfect hideaway. I sat on the bed closest to the window and finally let the tears fall. They weren't gentle, quiet tears, they were deep sobs that came from the core of my being, as if my body were trying to expel all the pain at once. Margaret sat beside me and held my hand, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the best comfort. When I finally managed to speak, my voice was rough. How long do you think they've been planning this? I don't know, but we'll find out. Margaret pulled her laptop from her bag. I'll start researching everything I can about your assets, your accounts, any unusual financial transactions. Do you have online access to your bank? I shook my head. Sarah set it up for me, but I rarely use it. I've always preferred to go to the bank in person. Okay, we'll check tomorrow. But Dorothy, I need you to think. Has there been anything strange recently? Documents you've been asked to sign? Bank visits you didn't initiate? Anything out of the ordinary? I closed my eyes, trying to remember. The last 6 months had been a blur of routine Tuesdays eating dinner with the family, Wednesdays at church, prayer meeting, Thursdays helping at the charity bazaar, Saturdays tending the garden. But there was something. 3 months ago, I began slowly. Rebecca asked me to sign some paperwork. She said it was a health plan update, something about new beneficiaries. I signed it without reading much because I trusted her. Margaret stopped typing and looked at me. Do you have copies of these documents? No. Rebecca said she would make copies for me, but she never gave them to me. Shit, Margaret whispered, turning back to her laptop. Dorothy, this could be much worse than we thought. If they made you sign power of attorney without your knowledge. My phone rang, interrupting her. Joseph's name flashed on the screen. I looked at Margaret, who shook her head. Don't answer yet. Let him worry. We need time. The phone rang 7 times before going to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. The 3rd time, Margaret grabbed my phone and hung up completely. Tomorrow, we'll get you a new number. For now, you're disconnected from their world. We spent the next few hours planning. Margaret had a sharp legal mind, and every question she asked revealed layers of danger I hadn't considered. Powers of attorney, guardianship, forged medical documents. Every legal term was a weapon that could be used against me. But Dr. Bradford refused to help them, I argued. That counts for something, doesn't it? It counts for a lot, but they'll find another doctor. There's always someone willing to sign anything for money. Margaret closed her laptop and looked at me seriously. Dorothy, you need to be prepared for the possibility of this going to court. You'll have to expose your own family publicly. Are you ready for that? I wasn't. How could anyone be ready to declare war on their own son? But then I thought of the words on the note. You've lived too much and can't wait any longer. I thought about how many years I still had ahead of me. Bradford said my heart was strong, that I had many good years ahead of me, years that Joseph and Rebecca wanted to take from me, locking me away in an institution while they spent my money and lived in my house. I'm ready, I lied. But sometimes we lie to ourselves until the lie becomes the truth. Margaret smiled a sad but proud smile. Then let's do this right. We'll leave here tomorrow at 6:30. We'll be at Dr. Bradford's office at 7. Then we'll go straight to Nashville, to my office, and mount your legal defense. But Dorothy, Tribe, you need to be prepared for what Dr. Bradford will reveal about Robert. It could change everything you think you know. That night, lying in a strange bed in a hotel room that smelled of mildew and disinfectant, I couldn't sleep. Through the thick curtains I could see thin slices of moonlight, and I found myself praying for the first time in weeks. Lord, I whispered into the darkness, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why my family betrayed me like this. I don't know what secret Robert has been keeping. But I need strength, I need wisdom, and most of all, I need to know the truth. The Bible I always carried in my purse was at home on my nightstand. But some passages are so engraved in your heart that you don't need paper to remember them, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth. Tomorrow I would discover truths about my family, about Robert, about myself, and I was afraid of them all. My phone, even when turned off, seemed to pulse with unread messages. How many missed calls did I have? How many voicemails from Joseph asking where I was, feigning concern while plotting my destruction? And Sarah, my granddaughter, only 19. Did she know? Did that little girl I rocked, who I taught to make gingerbread cookies, who called me Grandma in that sweet voice, was she involved too? The pain of that possibility was almost physical, as if someone were squeezing my heart with their hands. Around 3 in the morning, I finally fell into a restless sleep, filled with fragmented dreams. Robert was there, younger, the way he'd been when we'd first married. He was holding something in an envelope, perhaps, or a letter, but every time I reached for it, he'd pull away, shaking his head sadly. I wanted to tell you, he said in the dream, but I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me from what? I screamed. But he was already disappearing, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. I woke up to Margaret gently shaking me. Dorothy, it's 6:15. We need to go. I washed my face with cold water, trying to erase the traces of a sleepless night. In the mirror, an old woman stared back at me, combed gray hair, puffy eyes from crying, wrinkles that seemed to have deepened overnight. When had I gotten so old? When had the girl who danced in the rain and dreamed of traveling the world become this weary woman? But in this weary woman's eyes, I saw something new. Something that hadn't been there yesterday. Determination, anger, and maybe, just maybe, a little hope. Have you ever found yourself looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person you've become? Have you ever wondered when you let your dreams die to live someone else's? The drive to Dr. Bradford's office was silent. Margaret drove with both hands firmly on the steering wheel, her eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror as if she expected us to be followed. Meadowbrook was still asleep. It was only 6:45, and the streets were empty except for a few early rising workers and the mailman making his rounds. We passed my house on Maple Street, and my heart sank. The lights were on in Joseph and Rebecca's room, the guest room they rented 3 times a week to keep me company. Now I knew the truth. They were watching me, studying me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Joseph's car, a silver SUV I'd helped pay for, was parked in the driveway. And next to it, another car I didn't recognize. Visitors so early, Margaret, I began, but she had already seen. Write down the license plate, she said, handing me a pen and paper. I quickly jotted it down as we passed. LKR 4729, Tennessee. We'll find out whose car this is, Margaret promised. Dr. Bradford's office was on a quiet side street, in an old 2-story building that had once been a residential home. The front door was unlocked, as he promised, and we entered into the morning quiet. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the hallway, and we followed the aroma to his private office. Dr. Bradford sat behind his desk, but he looked like he'd aged 10 years since yesterday. His eyes were puffy and red, and there was a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table, something you'd never expect to see on a professional doctor at 7 in the morning. Mrs. Jenkins, he said, struggling to his feet. And you must be ... double quotes, Margaret Sullivan, lawyer, Dorothy's cousin. He nodded, as if he'd expected it. It's a good thing you brought legal representation. You'll need it. He gestured to the chairs in front of the table. Please, have a seat. What I have to tell you isn't easy. We sat down, and I held Margaret's hand tightly, bracing myself for what was to come. Dr. Bradford took a thick, yellowed envelope from his desk drawer. It was sealed with red wax, like old letters from centuries past. On the envelope, in handwriting I immediately recognized, was written, to Dorothy Mae Jenkins. Open only in case of emergency or upon my death. Robert J. Jenkins. My heart stopped. Robert, ... Did he leave this with you? 10 years ago. The week before he died. Dr. Bradford pushed the envelope across the table. He made me promise to keep it a secret unless a situation arose. Exactly like this. He said, if anyone tries to hurt her, if anyone questions her sanity, if she's in danger only, then do you give this to her? I think that moment has come. With hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it, I picked up the envelope. The wax was cracked with age, but still intact. The weight of the paper in my hands felt like the weight of the entire world. There's more, Dr. Bradford continued, about your son Joseph and Rebecca. After they left yesterday, I made some calls to colleagues at other clinics. Dorothy, ... You're not the first elderly person they've tried to admit. The air left my lungs. What do you mean? Rebecca's mother. 3 years ago, she was admitted to a Nashville nursing home, claiming dementia. She died 6 months later. Rebecca inherited everything: a house, considerable savings, a small investment fund. But the doctor who signed the documents lost his license last year for medical fraud. There are suspicions that Rebecca's mother was perfectly sane when she was admitted. Margaret swore under her breath. I simply stared at Dr. Bradford, trying to process what I was hearing. Joseph met Rebecca soon after that, he continued, 6 months after her mother's death. And now, 3 years later, They're trying to do the exact same thing to you. You're saying that my son, that they... I couldn't finish the sentence. It was too horrible to say out loud. I'm telling you that you're dealing with professional criminals, and that you need to open this letter now, because something tells me Robert knew. Somehow, he knew this could happen. With Margaret and Dr. Bradford watching in silence, I broke the wax seal. The envelope contained several pages of handwritten letters, along with some folded documents. I recognized Robert's handwriting immediately, the slanted handwriting he developed after the stroke that left his left hand weaker. I started reading, and with each word, the world I knew crumbled a little more. My dear Dorothy, if you're reading this, then something terrible has happened or is about to happen. Forgive me for not telling you while I was alive, but I thought I was protecting you. Now I know that silence is sometimes the worst protection of all. When we adopted Joseph 45 years ago, I told you he was the son of an acquaintance who died in childbirth. I told you his father was unknown. I told you he needed a loving family. I lied, Dorothy, about almost everything. Joseph wasn't the son of an acquaintance. He was the son of my older brother, Thomas Jenkins, the brother I never mentioned. The one I pretended didn't exist after our family split up. Thomas was... There's no kind word for what he was. A con man. A man without conscience. He spent his life running scams, deceiving people, destroying families. And when he was arrested for the third time for elder fraud, he had a 3-year-old son, Joseph. Joseph's mother died of an overdose when he was 2. Thomas was in prison. The child was going to foster care, and I couldn't let that happen. So I took Joseph. But I told you that lie because I was afraid. Afraid of what, you ask? Fear that Thomas's blood ran in Joseph's veins. Fear that no matter how much love we gave, Thomas's nature would eventually show. Fear that I was bringing evil into our loving home. And Dorothy, my love, my fear was right. In the last 2 years of my life, I started noticing things. Little lies from Joseph, money disappearing from my wallet, documents moved around in my office. Once I caught him and Rebecca whispering about when the old man finally dies. I knew, God forgive me, I knew, and I did nothing because I was dying and I was a coward. But I took precautions. The documents attached to this letter are: 1. Joseph's original birth certificate showing Thomas Jenkins as the biological father. 2. Criminal records of Thomas Jenkins died in prison in 2003. 3. Contract from a private investigator I hired to monitor Joseph for the last 6 months of my life. He documented 3 small scams Joseph ran on elders in the congregation, including Widow Thompson, who loaned him $5,000 that was never repaid. 4. A secret bank account worth $280,000. It's in your name only. Joseph never knew about it. Use it to protect yourself. 5. A duplicate of my actual will, not the one Joseph has access to, but the real one, leaving everything to you and, upon your death, to charity. Joseph inherits nothing. Dorothy, forgive me. Forgive me for bringing this curse into our lives. Forgive me for not being strong enough to confront it. Forgive me for dying and leaving you to deal with this alone. But, above all, don't blame yourself. You loved that boy with all your heart. You did everything right. The fault wasn't yours, it was mine, it was Thomas's. It was the evil that sometimes passes from generation to generation, no matter how much love we try to instill. If you need help, look for Dr. Bradford. He has copies of everything. And remember the words we always quoted: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You're stronger than you think, Dorothy. You always have been. With all my eternal love, Robert P. There's one last thing you need to know, but I haven't had the courage to write it. Dr. Bradford has a separate letter that explains it. Prepare your heart, my love. The pages fell from my hands. I wasn't crying. I was beyond tears, in a place where the shock is so deep that the body forgets how to express emotion. There's more, Dr. Bradford said softly, pushing another, smaller envelope across the table. Robert gave me this separately. He said it should only be opened if you were strong enough to handle the first letter. Have you ever received news so devastating that your brain simply refused to process it? Have you ever felt that moment of suspension between knowing and accepting? Margaret took my hand. Dorothy, you don't need to read now. We can wait. No, I interrupted, my voice strangely firm. We've waited long enough. Open for me, Margaret. I don't trust my hands. Margaret took the envelope and carefully opened it. There was only one sheet of paper inside, with 3 paragraphs in Robert's handwriting. Dorothy, Sarah is not Joseph's biological granddaughter. 3 years ago, when Rebecca miraculously got pregnant after years of trying, I secretly took a DNA test when the baby was born. Sarah is Rebecca's daughter with another man, a wealthy married man who paid Rebecca to keep quiet. Joseph never found out. Rebecca used the money to buy her car and take that business trip to Miami. But Sarah is innocent in all this. She's a sweet, genuine child. Don't let her parents' scene stain her, please. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the clock on the wall seemed to have stopped ticking. Finally, I spoke, my voice sounding distant and disconnected. So, nothing was real. Joseph isn't who I thought he was. Sarah isn't my blood granddaughter. My entire family was built on lies. Not everything, Margaret said firmly. Your love was real. Your sacrifice was real. You were real, Dorothy. They were the ones who were fake. Dr. Bradford stood and went to a locked drawer in the corner of the room. There's one last thing. Robert asked me to give you this, if it came to that. He returned with a small velvet box. Inside was a wedding ring, not the one I wore, but another, older one, with an inscription inside, to my real Dorothy. Forgive me for all the secrets. I love you beyond time. I held the ring, that little gold circle Robert had bought before he died but never given me, and finally, the tears came. Not tears of sadness not just sadness, but tears of release, because now I knew the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, was better than living a comfortable lie. What do we do now? I asked, looking at Margaret. My cousin smiled, not a sad smile, but a fierce one, like a wolf baring its teeth. Now we fight. And Dorothy, when we're done, they'll regret underestimating you. Margaret transformed Dr. Bradford's office into a makeshift command center. She spread all of Robert's documents across the table: birth certificates, criminal records, private investigator reports, bank statements. Each paper was a weapon, and Margaret was a general planning the battle. First, she said, pointing to the secret account statement, we're going to transfer this money to a new account in your name only, today, now. Before Joseph finds out it exists. Dr. Bradford, can we borrow your computer? While Margaret worked, typing furiously and making calls, I was still processing everything. Joseph wasn't just an ungrateful son, he was the son of a criminal, the grandson of a line of lies, and Rebecca had killed her own mother for money, and was she trying to do the same to me? Dorothy, Dr. Bradford called softly, you need something to eat. I'm ordering breakfast from the bakery. What do you want? Food. He was talking about food when my whole world had just exploded, but I looked at him and saw genuine concern in his eyes, the concern of a doctor seeing a patient in shock. Anything, I muttered. Doesn't matter. It does matter, he insisted. You'll need your strength for what lies ahead. Toast with strawberry jam and tea, like you always ordered when Robert was being treated here. The kindness of that simple gesture, that he remembered my favorite breakfast from 10 years ago, most made me break down again. But I'd cried enough. Now it was time to be strong. Yes, I agreed. And maybe some scrambled eggs, if it's not too much trouble. Margaret hung up the phone and turned to me. Okay, bank transfer scheduled for 9 a.m. when the bank opens. I've scheduled a meeting with a judge friend of mine in Nashville for 2 p.m. He's going to issue a protective order preventing Joseph from accessing any of his assets. And I've hired a private investigator to start working on Rebecca's case and her mother's death. All this in half an hour? I asked, impressed. All this in 20 minutes. I work fast when family is in danger. She sat down beside me and took my hand. Dorothy, you need to understand something. What's coming next is going to be horrible. Joseph and Rebecca will fight tooth and nail. They will lie, they will manipulate, they will try to make you look crazy. Are you ready for this? Have you ever had to choose between peace and justice? Between the comfort of pretending everything is fine and the pain of facing the truth head on? I thought about my life's 72 years of caring for others, of putting everyone before myself, of maintaining family peace even when that peace was built on lies. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my anger, ignored my intuition, chosen to believe comfortable lies instead of difficult truths. I'm not ready, I admitted. but I'm going to do it anyway. Breakfast arrived, and I forced myself to eat even though I wasn't hungry. Margaret was righty, would need strength. As we ate, she explained the plan to me. Today, we're going to Nashville. You'll stay at my apartment, it's safe. There's a 24-hour doorman, and no one will think to look for you there. Tomorrow we'll meet with the private investigator and start building the criminal case against them. Elder fraud, document forgery, possible murder in the case of Rebecca's mother. And Sarah? I asked. Robert's letter says she's innocent. Margaret paused. We'll have to investigate that too. She may actually know nothing, or she may be involved. We can't presume innocence just because she's young. The thought of Sarah, that little girl I'd taught to braid, who'd hug me and say, I love you, Grandma. Being involved was almost unbearable, but Margaret was right. I couldn't afford to trust blindly anymore. There's one thing I don't understand, Dr. Bradford said. Why now? Why did Joseph and Rebecca decide to act specifically now? It was a good question. I was 72 years old, healthy, and showed no signs of illness. Why the urgency? Margaret picked up the phone. I'll call some contacts and find out. But usually when criminals accelerate their plans, it's because there's external pressure. Debt, maybe, or someone is about to discover them. My own phone still turned off was in my bag. Should I call Joseph? Tell him I'm okay? No, Margaret replied firmly. Let him worry. Let him despair. Desperate people make mistakes, and we need them to make mistakes. We spent another 2 hours in Dr. Bradford's office, organizing documents, making copies of everything, preparing our case. Around 10 a.m., the office phone rang. It was his receptionist, who had arrived to open the door. Dr. Bradford, there's a man here named Joseph Jenkins. He says he's the son of a patient and that she disappeared yesterday. He's very upset and wants to speak with you. Margaret and I exchanged glances. He was looking for me. Tell him, I'm in a consultation and can't be interrupted. Dr. Bradford instructed, offer him to leave a number and I'll get back to you later. We heard muffled voices on the other end of the line. Then the receptionist came back, sounding nervous. He says he won't leave until he talks to you. And there's a woman with him who's saying strange things about you kidnapping his mother, Rebecca. Of course, it would be Rebecca. Call the police, Dr. Bradford said calmly. Tell them there are people disturbing the office and making false accusations, and lock the front door. Margaret was already at the window, peering out at the street. There are 2 cars parked out front, the silver SUV and a black sedan. 3 people in total: Joseph, Rebecca, and a man I don't recognize. The car that was at my house this morning, I said. Someone they hired. The office phone rang again. This time it was Joseph, calling from his cell phone. Dr. Bradford put it on speakerphone. Dr. Bradford, I'm Joseph Jenkins. My mother disappeared after her appointment yesterday. Is she with you? Please. I need to know if she's okay. His voice sounded convincing, worried, scared, loving. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have fallen for his act. Mr. Jenkins, Dr. Bradford replied professionally, I cannot discuss patients, but I can tell you that your mother was in perfect health when she left here yesterday. She didn't come home. She's not answering her phone. I'm desperate here. Have you tried the police? They say I have to wait 48 hours to file a missing adult report. But she's elderly, she might be confused. Your mother is not confused. Mr. Jenkins, Dr. Bradford interrupted. In fact, yesterday I certified her as having full mental capacity. She is one of my most lucid patients. Silence on the other end. Then, well, she's been forgetful lately. My wife and I are worried about early onset dementia. Funny, Dr. Bradford said, his voice taking on a steely tone, because your wife visited me 2 days ago asking me to certify that very thing, and she offered me money to falsify medical records, which, I must point out, is a federal crime. Another, longer silence. When Joseph spoke again, his voice had changed. The concern was gone, replaced by something cold. Are you saying you refused to help my mother when she clearly needs special care? I'm saying your mother doesn't need any special care. And I'm saying you and your wife are under investigation. The line went dead. He had hung up. Margaret smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perfect. Now he knows we're one step ahead. That will make him desperate. Or dangerous, I warned. Or both, Margaret agreed. That's why we need to get out of here now. Dr. Bradford, is there a back exit? Yes, Through the parking lot behind my car is there. We quickly gathered our things. All the documents went into a folder that Margaret guarded like gold. As we walked out the back door, I heard noise coming from the front of the office, loud voices, a banging sound. They're trying to force their way in, Dr. Bradford said. The police should be here in minutes, but we can't wait. We ran, and it's strange to run at 72. To feel your heart racing not from exercise, but from fear. To feel your lungs burning as you flee from your own family. We got into Dr. Bradford's car, a modest Honda, and he sped off before we'd even fully closed the doors. Where to? He asked. Highway, Margaret instructed. Nashville, and drive fast, but not so fast that you attract attention. I glanced in the rearview mirror as we pulled out of the parking lot. For a second, I saw Joseph running into the street, his face red with anger. He saw the car, and our eyes met for a split second. The expression on his face wasn't that of a worried son, it was that of a predator who had lost his prey. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you loved and seen a stranger staring back? Have you ever felt that moment of recognition when you realized they were a stranger all along, and you just didn't want to see them? During the drive to Nashville, my phone still switched off, weighed like a stone in my bag. How many messages were there? How many missed calls? And what would they say when I finally got to them? Margaret, I began hesitantly, what if we're wrong? What if there's an explanation for all of this? My cousin looked at me with a mixture of sadness and firmness. Dorothy, you've read Robert's letters. You've seen the criminal records. You've listened to Dr. Bradford. Where in all this do you think there might be a misunderstanding? I'm just 45 years old, Margaret. 45 years raising that boy. How can I accept that it was all a lie? It wasn't all a lie, she said gently. Your love was real. Your sacrifices were real. You were real. The lie was theirs, not yours. Dr. Bradford, who had been driving quietly, finally spoke. Mrs. Jenkins, in my 30 years of medicine, I've learned one thing. Some people are born with something broken inside. No matter how much love you give, how much you try to fix it, the break is in the foundation. It's not your fault. You did everything right. The problem was there all along. The words were harsh, but there was truth in them. I'd seen signs over the years, little cruelties from Joseph, moments of coldness, the way he looked at money with that glint in his eye. But I always justified it, always found excuses. He's stressed. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just a phase. I had been complicit in my own blindness. We arrived in Nashville around noon. Margaret's apartment was in a modern downtown building, with a uniformed doorman and security cameras in every hallway. She took me up to the 8th floor, to a spacious, bright apartment with a view of the city. Welcome to your temporary hideout, she said, tossing her keys into a bowl by the door. Pretend this is your home. There's food in the fridge, clean clothes in the guest room, closetware, about the same size, and the Wi-Fi is unlimited. Dr. Bradford placed the folder with the documents on the kitchen table. I'm going back to Meadowbrook and dealing with the mess Joseph made at the office. But I'll be available 24/7 if you need me. And Dorothy ... double quotes. He took my hand. You're one of the strongest women I know. Robert knew that. That's why he trusted you to handle the truth. After he left, Margaret made tea, strong English tea, the way our grandmother used to make it. We sat in the living room, and for the first time in 24 hours, I breathed. What happens now? I asked. Now you get some rest. Take a shower, change your clothes, sleep if you can. At 2 p.m. we have a meeting with the judge. After that, I meet with the private investigator at 4 p.m. Tomorrow we start building the criminal case. What about Joseph and Rebecca? Let them hang themselves with their own rope. The more desperate they become, the more mistakes they will make. And each mistake is more evidence for us. I went to the guest room, a cozy space with a double bed and white curtains that filtered the sunlight. There were clothes in the closet, as Margaret had promised, and I chose a simple navy blue dress. In the bathroom, I finally looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had eyes red from crying, messy hair, and deep wrinkles around her mouth and eyes. But there was something different, a flicker of something that hadn't been there before, anger perhaps, or determination, or simply a refusal to die quietly while criminals stole the rest of my life. I took the longest shower I'd taken in years, letting the hot water wash away not only the dirt but also the emotional exhaustion. I cried under the shower where no one could see, crying for Robert and his secrets, For Joseph and his lies. For the family I thought I had but never did. When I emerged, dressed in clean clothes and with my hair combed, I felt, not better, exactly, but ready. Ready to fight, ready for the truth, no matter how ugly. Margaret was on the phone when I returned to the room, her voice professional and sharp. Yes, I want a full background check. Rebecca Martinez, born in 1985. Focus on the last 5 years, especially the period surrounding her mother's death. Yes, I'll email you the details. She hung up and looked at me. The investigator has already started working. I've also hired a forensic accountant to examine all your finances and see if there's more money missing than you know. How much will all this cost? I asked, worried. Dorothy, you have $280,000 in an account no one knew existed. Use it to defend yourself. That's what Robert left it for. She was right. Robert had anticipated this. He knew I would need resources to fight. By 2 p.m., we were in the chambers of Judge Thomas Hartwell, a black man in his 60s with graying hair and eyes that had seen it all. Margaret presented our case efficiently. Robert's documents, Dr. Bradford's note, the evidence of the conspiracy. This is serious, the judge said, shuffling through the papers. Very serious. Ms. Jenkins, are you sure you want to proceed? Once we start this, there's no going back. I'm sure, Your Excellency, I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. He nodded and began signing documents. I am issuing a protective order preventing Joseph Jenkins and Rebecca Martinez from accessing any property or bank accounts belonging to Dorothy Mae Jenkins. I am also ordering a freeze on any joint accounts pending a full investigation, and I am authorizing a police investigation into the allegations of attempted elder fraud. Every signature was a blow to Joseph and Rebecca. Every stamped piece of paper was a wall I built between them and myself. There's one more thing, Margaret said. We'd like a restraining order, prohibiting them from contacting Miss Jenkins. Granted, they must maintain a minimum distance of 500 feet. Any attempt to make contact is a violation and results in immediate arrest. The judge looked at me sympathetically. Ms. Jenkins, I'm sorry for what you're going through, but know that you did the right thing by coming here today. We left the courthouse with a briefcase full of legal documents that made my family strangers forbidden to approach me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt ... empty. It's normal to feel this way, Margaret said, as if reading my thoughts. You've just cut ties with your son. Even if he's a criminal, he's still been your son for 45 years. Grieving is allowed. At 4 p.m., we met with the private investigator, a man named Marcus Webb who looked like he'd stepped out of a film noir dark suit, serious expression, briefcase full of information he'd collected in just a few hours. Mrs. Jenkins, he began, spreading photographs on the table. Your son and daughter-in-law have been very busy. Marcus Webb had the kind of gaze that saw through the masks people wear. He spread photographs across Margaret's desk like tarot cards revealing dark destinies, and each image was a stab to the heart of the illusion that remained about my family. This was taken 3 weeks ago, he said, pointing to a photo of Joseph entering a Memphis gambling den. Your son has a serious gambling problem. He owes at least $150,000 to loan sharks. This man here, he pointed to a shadowy figure in the photo, is known as Tommy the Shark. He's not the kind of person who accepts excuses or late payments. My mouth went dry. Joseph gambling. My son, whom I taught to be responsible with money, who watched Robert and I save every penny. There's more, Marcus continued, pulling up another set of photos. Rebecca has been having an affair for 2 years. This man, one photo showed Rebecca kissing a man in an expensive suit outside a hotel, is Richard Blackwood, a divorce lawyer. Ironic, isn't it? Married, 3 kids, and from what I've gathered, he promised to leave his wife for Rebecca. But he changed his mind last month. Rebecca was furious, Marcus continued. I have text messages where she threatens to expose his affair if he doesn't give her money. Basic blackmail. He paid her $20,000 to keep quiet, but now he refuses to pay any more. Margaret whistled softly. Then they desperately need money. Gambling debts, blackmail that's no longer working. And there's the matter of the granddaughter, Marcus interrupted, pulling out more photos. This time they were of Sarah. My sweet Sarah. Bob. The images told a story I didn't want to believe. Sarah, at parties where drugs were visible on the tables, Sarah with a group of young people Marcus identified as known for petty crime. Sarah in and out of a clinic that, Marcus explained, was known for addiction treatment. Is she using it? I asked, my voice barely audible. OxyContin, mostly. It started as a legitimate prescription after knee surgery last year. It's evolved into addiction. Joseph and Rebecca know. In fact, they used it against her like this. Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed me text messages between Rebecca and Sarah. Every word was poison. Rebecca, if you don't get Grandma to sign these papers, I'll tell the police about your pills. Sarah, Mom, please, I'm trying to stop. Rebecca, try faster. Or you'll go to forced rehab, and everyone will know you're an addict. Have you ever discovered that the people you loved most were monsters in disguise? That every gesture of affection was carefully calculated to control you? My hands trembled as I held the tablet. Sarah was a victim too. A victim of her own parents, used as a tool to manipulate me. There's more, Marcus said, but his voice now held a note of hesitation. Mrs. Jenkins, what I'm about to show you now is ... disturbing. Are you sure you want to see it? I looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. We've come this far, Dorothy. We can't stop now. Marcus pulled out a thick envelope and took out a series of documents. I've accessed the death records for Rebecca's mother, Linda Martinez, who died 3 years ago. The official cause of death was complications of advanced dementia. But look at this. He showed me medical records from the week before Linda's death. She was taking a very high dose of sedatives prescribed by a doctor who, I discovered, lost his license 2 years later for irregular prescribing. And look here. He pointed to a specific line. A nursing home nurse made a note saying the patient seemed lucid and frightened, saying her daughter was trying to kill her, but that note was crossed out and marked as delirium. The air left my lungs. They killed her. I can't legally prove it yet, Marcus admitted. But there are enough indicators to reopen the investigation, especially with the pattern they're trying to repeat with you. Margaret was already furiously taking notes. This changes everything. We're no longer just talking about Elderfroth. We're potentially talking about murder. There's one last thing, Marcus said, and for the first time I saw real hesitation in his eyes. I found this in the records of Thomas Jenkins Roberts' brother, Joseph's biological father. He handed me a yellowed document, the psychological report from when Thomas was in prison. I read the words, but my brain refused to process them fully. Patient demonstrates traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder. Lack of empathy, habitual manipulation, history of domestic violence. Evaluator notes that patient views other people as objects to be used for personal gain. Prognosis for rehabilitation, poor. What does that mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. It means, Marcus said gently, that Joseph may have inherited more than just his father's genes. Sociopathy has a genetic component. It doesn't excuse his behavior, but it explains it. The room fell silent. The weight of all these revelations, the debts, the affair, the blackmail, Sarah's manipulation, the possible death of Rebecca's mother, the genetic inheritance of evil was almost unbearable. What do we do now? I asked finally. Margaret closed her notebook and looked at me with fierce determination. Now we go to war. And Dorothy, when we're done, they won't just lose. They'll pay for everything they've done. Margaret's phone rang. It was Dr. Bradford, and he sounded urgent. Margaret, turn on the TV. Channel 5, local news from Meadowbrook. Now. Margaret rushed to turn on the television. The screen showed the front of Dr. Bradford's office, lined with police tape and cameras. A blonde reporter was speaking, ... and Joseph Jenkins, 43, is alleging that Dr. William Bradford kidnapped his elderly mother, Dorothy Mae Jenkins, 72, after a doctor's appointment yesterday. The family is asking for the public's help in locating Mrs. Jenkins, who they say suffers from dementia and may be disoriented. The screen changed to show Joseph, tears streaming down his face, Rebecca at his side holding his hand. My mother needs urgent medical help, he said, his voice breaking. Dr. Bradford refused to treat her properly, and now she's missing. Please, if anyone has seen Dorothy Mae Jenkins, call the police immediately. That son of a Margaret began, but stopped when she saw my expression. I was staring at the screen, at my son crying fake tears, at my daughter-in-law looking worried. and I felt something inside me break. Not my spirit, that was still intact. What broke was the last strand of doubt, the last shred of hope that perhaps there had been some misunderstanding. They were painting me as a confused elderly woman, kidnapped by an irresponsible doctor. They were using the news, public opinion, turning me into a victim in the eyes of the world while they were the real predators. They declared war, I said, my voice strangely calm. So let's give them a war. Margaret smiled, not a cheerful smile, but a dangerous one. That's the spirit. Marcus, how long will it take you to compile all this into a complete report? 2 days, maybe 3. You have 1 day, Margaret said. Let's call a press conference for the day after tomorrow. If they want to play dirty with the media, we'll bury them with the truth. Have you ever had to choose between being seen as a victim or fighting as a warrior? Have you ever had to decide whether to accept the narrative others have created about you or write your own story? That night, in Margaret's apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Joseph as a child. He had frequent nightmares, dreams of being chased by something he couldn't see. I spent hours holding him, singing lullabies, promising him he was safe. Nothing will hurt you, I used to whisper. Mommy is here, you're safe. Now I wondered what was haunting Joseph in those dreams. Was it the nature of his biological father, already manifesting itself even in a young child? Was it genetically programmed guilt he couldn't control? Or was I making excuses again, trying to find explanations that would make my son the victim instead of the villain? Stop it, Margaret said from the bedroom doorway. She was wearing an old robe and carrying 2 cups of tea. I can hear you thinking from my room. How did you know? Because I would do the same. I would stay up looking for reasons, excuses, explanations. She handed me a cup and sat on the edge of the bed. But Dorothy, some people are just bad. Not because they've been mistreated, not because they have bad genes, not for any reason we can understand. They just are. But I created him. You raised a boy who was already broken. You gave love to someone who couldn't give it back. It wasn't your fault. Just as it wouldn't be your fault if you planted seeds in poisoned soil and they didn't grow. I drank the tikka chamomile with honey, warm and comforting. Margaret, do you think Sarah can be saved? My cousin was quiet for a moment. Maybe, if we get her out of that toxic environment. If we get her proper treatment. But Dorothy, you can't save everyone. Sometimes you have to save yourself first. She's my granddaughter. She's not. The words were harsh, but necessary. Biologically, you have no relationship with her, and emotionally, she was used as a tool to manipulate you. That doesn't mean you can't help her, but you need to tread lightly. Protect yourself first. He knew Margaret was right, but it still hurt. Sarah had been my joy, the child I thought I could do differently, that I could raise in a loving family unlike Joseph's traumatic childhood. But that loving family was a lie. It always was. Tomorrow, Margaret said, standing up, we'll start fighting back. We'll hire a top criminal lawyer to represent you. We'll document every lie they've told. And we'll make sure that when this goes to court, they'll have nowhere to run. What if we lose? We won't lose, because we have something they don't have. What, the truth? Margaret left, and I was left alone with my tea and my thoughts. I grabbed my cell phone, still off, and for the first time in 2 days, turned it on. The screen exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, 89 text messages, 23 voicemails. I opened the text messages, starting with the oldest. Joseph, mother, where are you? Joseph, please call me. I'm worried. Joseph, mommy, that's not funny. Where did you go? Then they changed their tone. Joseph, what did Dr. Bradford tell you? He's lying about us. Rebecca, Dorothy, we need to talk. There are things you don't understand. Joseph, I know you're with that lawyer. You're making a terrible mistake. And finally, the most recent, Joseph, you're going to regret this. I'll prove you're senile and lock you away where you can't hurt anyone else. Rebecca, stupid old woman, do you really think you can beat us? Every message was evidence. Every threat was another rope they were using to hang themselves. I only replied to one message, short and direct. See you in court. So, I blocked both numbers and turned the phone off again. But before I completely hung up, I noticed a message I'd missed from Sarah. Grandma, please call me. I need to tell you the truth about everything. They don't know I'm sending this to you. Please, I'm scared. My heart sank. Sarah needed me. The girl was crying out for help. Or was it another manipulation? Another trick to make me lower my guard? I showed the message to Margaret, who was still awake in her room working on her laptop. It could be legit, she admitted. Marcus said she's being manipulated by her parents, but it could also be a setup. They might have forced her to send this to lure you in. How do we know? We don't know. But Dorothy, if you answer, it has to be from my phone, in a public place, with Marcus present, to document everything. No risk. When tomorrow? After we have more information from Marcus. If it's a setup, we'll be prepared. If it's legit, ... Well, saving Sarah might be the only good thing that comes out of this whole situation. The next morning arrived with that kind of cruel clarity that makes everything seem too sharp, too real. There was no longer the comfortable fog of denial to hide behind, only the harsh truth, exposed in the harsh light of day. Margaret was already awake when I left the room, her apartment smelling of strong coffee and something baking in the oven. She was on the phone, her voice professional and sharp as ever. ... Yes, I understand. But I need you to speed up the process. We're dealing with a potentially violent situation here. ... Thank you. I look forward to hearing from you. She hung up and turned to me. Good morning. Did you get some sleep? A little, I lied. I'd slept for perhaps 2 hours, and even then, it had been filled with disturbing dreams where Joseph was a child again, but with Thomas Jenkins's eyes cold, calculating, empty. The criminal lawyer will meet with us at 10 a.m. Richard Morrison, one of the best in the state, a little arrogant, but extremely effective. Margaret poured coffee into a large mug, and Marcus will arrive at 9 a.m. with an update. And Sarah, Margaret paused. I texted her from my phone, as if I were you. I told her to meet us at 11 a.m. in Riverside Park, a public place, full of people, no risk of being set up. If she really wants help, she'll show up. I sipped my coffee, looking out Margaret's window. Nashville was waking up, ordinary people going to ordinary jobs, living ordinary lives. I used to be one of them. Now I was, ... What? A 72-year-old woman, running from her family, hiding in an apartment, preparing for a legal battle that could destroy everything left of my life. You're having doubts, Margaret observed. It wasn't a question, not doubts about the truth, but about whether it's worth it, whether it wouldn't be easier to just disappear, move to another state, start over somewhere they'd never find me. Dorothy Mae Jenkins, Margaret said firmly, using my full name like my mother used to when I was a child and needed a scolding. You're 72, not 172. You have many good years ahead of you. Are you going to let criminals take your home, your money, your dignity? Are you going to let them get away with it? What if I lose? What if the judge believes them? It won't. Margaret placed a stack of documents on the table. Because we have this, bank records showing embezzlement, photographs of Joseph at a gambling house, evidence of Rebecca's extramarital affair, text messages from them threatening you, medical reports proving you're perfectly sane, and Dr. Bradford's testimony. She was right. Evidently, we were practically unbeatable. But evidence didn't stop me from feeling like I was betraying my own son. He's been cheating on you, Margaret said, again reading my thoughts. Probably for 45 years. You're just finally seeing the truth. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to someone who doesn't deserve it and loyalty to yourself? Have you ever had to decide whether to remain a victim or become a survivor? Marcus Webb arrived promptly at 9 a.m. carrying another briefcase even thicker than the last. He looked like he hadn't slept, dread, unshaven, and a slightly wrinkled shirt. I worked all night, he said, refusing the coffee Margaret offered. And I found things. Dorothy, get ready. He spread out more photographs and documents. Let's start with the worst. Rebecca Martinez, or should I say, Rebecca Delgado. That's her real name. She legally changed it 4 years ago, shortly after her mother died. Why would anyone change their name? I asked. To escape debt and an arrest warrant. Marcus showed official documents. Rebecca Delgado was charged with credit card fraud in 2019. She scammed 3 elderly people in Tampa, Florida, stealing about $80,000. She reached a plea deal and paid restitution, but the criminal record remains. Margaret whistled softly. Did Joseph know this when he married her? Not only did he know he was complicit. Look at this. Marcus produced marriage records. Joseph and Rebecca were married 6 months after she was released from parole. And look at the address they used on the marriage certificate. It was my home. They had gotten married and immediately moved in with me, using my address, living off my generosity while they planned. They met at a support group, Marcus continued. Not for addiction for people with debt problems. Joseph was in debt to loan sharks even then. Rebecca was trying to rebuild her life after the trial. They met and, well, they recognized each other. Predators recognize predators. And Sarah, my voice came out in a whisper. Marcus hesitated. Sarah is ... complicated. Biologically, she's not Joseph's daughter. The DNA test I got confirms what Robert wrote. But there's something Robert didn't know. What Sarah's biological father isn't some rich married man. It's Richard Blackwood, the divorce lawyer Rebecca is now having an affair with. The silence in the room was absolute. It took a while for my brain to process. Was Rebecca having an affair with Sarah's biological father? Had they kept in touch all these years? It gets worse, Marcus said. Blackwood has a sizable life insurance policy, $2 million, and he recently changed the beneficiaries to, guess what? Rebecca, Margaret, these, and Sarah, 50% each. If something happens to Blackwood, they'll be millionaires. Are you suggesting ... I couldn't finish the sentence? I'm suggesting Rebecca is planning something. Blackwood ended the affair a month ago. She was furious. And now I've discovered she bought life insurance in his name, legally questionable. But she used forged documents claiming they were still lovers and she had a financial interest. Margaret stood up and began pacing the room. So it's not just about stealing from Dorothy. It's about building a portfolio of fraud. Dorothy is just another victim on a list. And Sarah, I repeated. Is she involved in all this, or is she a victim? We'll find out in 2 hours, Marcus said, looking at his watch. But Dorothy, you need to be prepared for any possibility. Sarah might genuinely need help. Or she might be as dangerous as her parents. At 10 a.m., Richard Morrison arrived. He was exactly as Margaret described, tall, impeccably dressed in a $3,000 suit, with that arrogant confidence of someone who's never lost a case. Or, if you have, you didn't care because he was charging by the hour. Mrs. Jenkins, he said, squeezing my hand with calculated strength, not too strong to be aggressive, not too weak to appear weak. Margaret briefed me on your situation. I want you to know, I will destroy these people. It wasn't what I expected to hear from a lawyer on our first meeting, but there was something refreshing about the brutal honesty. The case is solid, he continued, flipping through the documents Margaret and Marcus had compiled. Elder fraud, conspiracy, attempted fraudulent commitment, possible homicide in Rebecca's mother's case. I have connections in the state attorney's office. This is criminal, not just civil. How long? Margaret asked. To take it to trial. 6 months, maybe less, if we can get it expedited. But Dorothy, he looked at me directly, you need to understand something. When this goes public, and it will go public, because they've already gone to the media, your life will be temporarily hell. Journalists at your door, strangers on the internet giving their opinions. Your family will say horrible things about you, worse than what they're already saying, much worse. They'll fight dirty because they're desperate. They'll say you're senile, abusive, that you neglected Joseph as a child. They'll make up stories, bring in false witnesses. They'll try to destroy your reputation. Then why should I proceed? Morrison smiled, not a pleasant smile, but a predatory one. Because when we're done, they won't just lose. They'll go to prison, and you'll sleep at night knowing they can never hurt anyone again. By 11 a.m., we were at Riverside Park, a large, open park near the Cumberland River, filled with families picnicking, frisbee players, and running dogs. It was impossible for anyone to attempt anything violent without witnesses. Margaret, Marcus, and I sat on a bench overlooking the main entrance. Morrison sat in a nearby car, present but out of sight, in case Sarah got scared by the crowd. There, Marcus said, pointing. Sarah was walking through the gate, wearing jeans and a hoodie, sunglasses half covering her face. She walked slowly, looking around nervously, like a frightened animal ready to bolt. When she saw me, she stopped. Even from a distance, I could see her body trembling. I stood up and started walking toward her, but Margaret grabbed my arm, slowly. Let her come to you. If it's a trap, you want to be close to us. But something in Sarah's body language told me it wasn't a trap. It was genuine fear. I gestured for her to come closer. Sarah looked around once more, then began walking quickly, almost running toward me. When she got close, she took off her sunglasses. What I saw made me gasp. Her left eye was black and swollen, barely open. There was a fresh cut on her upper lip, finger marks around her neck, as if someone had tried to strangle her. "Grandma," she whispered, and collapsed in my arms, sobbing. Have you ever held someone you love and felt the physical wounds others have inflicted? Have you ever had to be strong for someone when you yourself were broken? Margaret and Marcus quickly approached. Marcus was already taking photographs of Sarah's injuries, documenting the evidence. "Who did this?" Margaret asked, her voice steely. "Mom," Sarah said through sobs. "When she found out I texted Grandma, she went crazy, said I ruined everything. Dad tried to hold me while she ... double quotes, she couldn't finish. She didn't need to." The marks told the story. "We need to get her to the hospital," I said. "Officially document this." "No," Sarah grabbed my arm. "If I go to the hospital, they'll find me. They'll drag me back. And next time, Grandma, they talked about drugging me, making it look like an overdose. They said it would be easier if I just ... disappeared." Marcus was already on the phone with the police. "We need an officer at Riverside Park. We have a minor with serious injuries and allegations of domestic violence and death threats." "Sarah," Margaret knelt down to her eye level. "Are you saying your parents threatened to kill you?" "Not directly, but I heard them talking. Mother said I knew too much. That if Grandma won in court, I could testify against them. And Father said problems can be ... eliminated. Eliminated." The word hung in the air like poisonous smoke. "Tell us everything," Margaret said gently. "From the beginning. What do you know?" Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath and began to speak. And with each word, the extent of the conspiracy became clearer, more horrific. "I met my real parents 3 months ago," she began. "They think I don't know, but I know I'm not my dad's biological daughter. I took a DNA test last year when I was researching my family's medical history. I found out my real father is Richard Blackwood." "Did you tell them you knew?" Margaret asked. "Not directly, but I think Mom suspected. She started including me in conversations about Grandma. She said we needed her money to help me with college. That Grandma was getting senile anyway, and it would be better for her to be somewhere where she could be cared for." "Did you believe it at first?" "Yes. Grandma, you started repeating stories sometimes. You forgot some appointments. I thought maybe they were right. I was being drugged. I realized suddenly, wasn't that right? They were putting something in my food." Sarah nodded miserably. "Xanax. Mom would grind it into her food at dinner. Not enough to hurt you, but enough to make you confused. Then she'd point at people in church and say, 'See, she's losing her memory,' creating evidence." Margaret and Marcus exchanged glances. Another crime to add to the list. "When did you know it was more than genuine concern?" I asked. 2 weeks ago. I was looking for aspirin in their room, and I found ... I found documents. A fake will with your signature, Grandma. A fake power of attorney, and a list." "What kind of list?" "Names. 8 names with amounts next to them. Grandma, you were number 6. The others ... I looked them up. They were all old people who had died or been hospitalized in the last 5 years. And next to each name was how much money my parents had made." Marcus was recording everything on his phone. Every word was evidence. Every confession was another nail in Joseph and Rebecca's coffin. "Did you confront them?" "I tried to talk to Dad when I was alone with him. I thought maybe he didn't know what Mom was doing, but he ... Sarah touched the cut on her lip. "He laughed. He said I was smart like Grandma Linda, Mom's mom. He said Linda had figured it out too, and look where she ended up. He admitted to killing Linda." Margaret leaned in. "Not in those words, but he implied it. Then he said I had 2 choices. Stay quiet and take part of the money when you got it all from Grandma, or ... or have an accident. Like Grandma Linda." The police then arrived. 2 officers, an older man and a young woman. Margaret spoke to them briefly, showing her legal credentials and explaining the situation. "We need police protection for the minor," she said, "and immediate arrest warrants for Joseph Jenkins and Rebecca Martinez for assault, threatening to kill, and conspiracy to commit elder fraud." The older officer, whose badge read SGT Williams, looked at Sarah compassionately. "Miss, are you willing to make a formal statement? Do you understand that this means testifying against your parents?" Sarah looked at me, her eyes, those eyes that used to shine when I made gingerbread cookies, that lit up when I told stories of when Robert was young, now filled with pain and fear and determination. "They're not my parents," she said, her voice firm for the first time. "Parents don't do that, they're monsters. And yes, I will testify." Sarah's statement at the police station lasted 3 hours. Every detail was documented, photographed, and recorded. The marks of violence on her body were catalogued by a forensic nurse. Rebecca's threatening text messages were downloaded and archived. The list of previous victims Sarah had encountered was confiscated as evidence. When it was over, Sarah was exhausted, shivering despite the mild temperature in the room. I wrapped my arms around her, this girl, who wasn't my blood granddaughter, but who needed me all the same. "You were very brave," I whispered into her hair. "I don't feel brave," she replied, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I feel ... broken." Margaret came with paperwork. "Sarah is officially in protective custody of the state for now. But Dorothy, if you'd like to be a temporary guardian, we can apply for that. It would be safer than foster care." I looked at Sarah, at this fragment of family that could perhaps be salvaged from the wreckage. "Do you want to stay with me?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then this is what we'll do," I decided. Sergeant Williams entered the room with his partner. "We have an arrest warrant out for Joseph Jenkins and Rebecca Martinez. We tried the Meadowbrook residence, the house was empty. It looks like they left in a hurry. The car is also missing. We've issued a statewide alert." "They ran," Marcus said. "They knew they were losing. Or they're planning something desperate," Margaret countered. "Dorothy, you and Sarah will stay in my apartment with 24-hour security until they're captured. No exceptions." The next 48 hours were a blur. Private security guards hired by Morrison patrolled Margaret's building. Sarah slept in the guest room, waking with nightmares of Rebecca stalking her. I lay awake at night, listening for every sound, waiting. What for Joseph to appear at the door, for Rebecca to find a way in. The story exploded in the media. Not just locally, nationally. Family conspires to steal elderly woman's inheritance was headline news everywhere. But with the news came opinions, and not all of them were favorable. In the online comments, trolls suggested I'd made it all up, that Sarah was lying to get money, that Joseph and Rebecca were victims of a senile old woman and a greedy lawyer. "Stop reading that," Margaret took away my tablet. "You know the truth. That's what matters, but it still hurt." Each comment was a small wound. And there were thousands of them. Have you ever been judged by people who know nothing about your story? Have you ever felt the weight of public opinion crushing your truth? On the third day, Joseph and Rebecca were captured trying to cross the border into Mexico. They had fake passports, $40,000 in cash, and a laptop that, when examined by police, contained the file. Sarah mentioned names, dates, and amounts stolen from 8 different elderly people over the course of 5 years. Victim number 1, Marcus showed me the list when he got access to the police files. Clara Whitmore, 78, died in a nursing home 6 months after being admitted. Estate, $340,000. Joseph and Rebecca got $180,000. The list went on, each name a tragedy, each amount a theft. And next to my name was written, current target, estimated value, $900,000, house plus savings plus pension, method, dementia, admission, status, compromised, committed, because I had found out, because Dr. Bradford had the courage to warn me, because I chose to fight instead of accept. The custody hearing was a media circus. Cameras were everywhere. Reporters shouted questions. Joseph and Rebecca entered handcuffed, wearing orange prison uniforms. When Joseph saw me in the gallery, he shouted, "Mom, Mom, please, this is all a misunderstanding." Rebecca was more direct. "You old bitch, you'll regret this." The judge banged his gavel. "Order, one more outburst like that and you'll both be sent to isolation." Morrison presented our case methodically. Sarah's photographs, the bank records, the forged documents, the list of victims, Rebecca's laptop with detailed instructions on how to manipulate elderly people. "These are not opportunistic criminals," Morrison declared. "They are serial predators who systematically targeted, manipulated, and robbed vulnerable seniors. And when discovered, they resorted to violence against a minor. They pose a clear and present danger to the community." The defense attorney, a nervous young man, clearly out of his league, tried to argue that Joseph and Rebecca were worried parents who had made errors in judgment. Errors of judgment. Morrison laughed humorlessly. Is falsifying medical documents an error of judgment? Is drugging an elderly woman an error of judgment? Is physically assaulting a 19-year-old woman an error of judgment? The judge denied bail. Joseph and Rebecca would remain jailed until trial, charged with multiple counts of elder fraud, conspiracy, assault, and terroristic threats, and under investigation for possible homicide in the case of Rebecca's mother. As they were led away, Joseph looked at me one last time. There was no longer the mask of a concerned son, just pure hatred. You destroyed our family, he said. No, I replied, my voice firm. You destroyed it. I just refused to be destroyed along with it. Outside the courthouse, the press conference Margaret organized drew dozens of reporters. Morrison spoke first, presenting the facts of the case. Then, it was my turn. My name is Dorothy Mae Jenkins, I began, my voice amplified by microphones. I'm 72 years old. For 45 years, I raised a boy I adopted, loving him as my own. I gave him everything I had, time, money, unconditional love, and he repaid me by planning to drug me, fraudulently commit me, and steal everything I worked my entire life to build. I paused, letting the words sink in. But I'm not here to lament. I'm here to warn. Elder fraud is an epidemic in this country. Millions of seniors are robbed, abused, and manipulated by the very people who should be protecting them: family, caregivers, even medical professionals. If you're elderly and something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. If family pressures you to sign documents you don't understand, question it. If doctors suggest hospitalization without a second opinion, investigate. If money disappears from your accounts, act. And if you are a son or daughter caring for elderly parents, be the person my children were not. Love truly, not as an inheritance. Care with respect, not control. And remember, one day you will be elderly too. The example you set now is the treatment you will receive later. The reporters exploded with questions. How do you feel about your son going to prison? Devastated, I replied honestly, but he made choices. Choices that hurt not only me, but other families. Justice sometimes hurts, but it's necessary. Do you forgive him? The question stopped me. Forgiveness. The Bible talks so much about forgiveness. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. But how do you forgive someone who has systematically tried to destroy you? I'm still processing it, I admitted. Maybe one day. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting crimes go unpunished. Forgiveness is about freeing my own heart from hatred, not about absolving it of consequences. After the press conference, Margaret, Sarah, and I returned to the apartment. There were flowers sent by strangers, people who had seen the news and wanted to show their support. Letters from other seniors who had suffered similar abuse. Even a call from the governor, offering help with reforming elder protection laws. You've become a symbol, Margaret said. For people who feel powerless. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to be Dorothy Ann, ordinary grandmother, living an ordinary life. But sometimes life chooses us for roles we didn't ask for. Sarah was on the couch, leafing through one of the letters. Grandma, look at this. She handed me a letter written in shaky handwriting. Esra Jenkins Way. I'm 81 years old. My son has been pressuring me to sign power of attorney so he can make things easier. My daughter-in-law suggests I should rest somewhere where I'll be well cared for. But after reading your story, I understand what they really want. Thank you for your courage. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. I hired a lawyer today. My assets are now protected. God bless you, Margaret Foster. Tears filled my eyes. I saved someone. You've saved so many people, Margaret corrected. Every person who sees their story and recognizes patterns in their own life. Every elderly person who finds the courage to question. Every child who stops and thinks, am I doing the right thing? Have you ever realized that your pain, when shared, can become healing for others? That your wounds can be beacons guiding people out of the darkness? In the weeks that followed, life found a new rhythm. Sarah began therapy for trauma, for addiction, to rebuild her shattered identity. Some days were good. Others, she woke up screaming, thinking Rebecca was at the door. But slowly, with love and time, and the right professionals, she began to heal. I also went to therapy. Processing 45 years of a relationship built on lies isn't something you can do alone. I learned about manipulation, sociopathy, and how predators choose victims. I learned it wasn't my fault. That genuine love doesn't protect against people who can't reciprocate. That sometimes we do everything right and still lose because the person on the other side was never playing fair. Dr. Bradford visited regularly, bringing updates on the upcoming trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor was confident of convictions on all counts. What about Rebecca's mother? I asked. Reopened, with new evidence and Sarah's testimony, there is basis for a second-degree murder charge. If proven, Rebecca could face life in prison. Life imprisonment. My son, not biologically, but legally also faced 25 to 30 years. You can still testify on his behalf, Dr. Bradford said gently. Talk about his childhood, about the person you tried to create. It may not change the outcome, but, double quotes, I won't, I interrupted. I won't lie about who he became because of who I tried to make him. He made choices, adult, conscious, cruel ones, and he needs to face consequences. The trial was scheduled for April, 6 months after the arrest. During that time, life had found a strange but functional balance. Sarah had been clean for 3 months, attending daily support meetings. I had moved to a smaller apartment in Nashville. I couldn't go back to that house in Meadowbrook, not with all the memories poisoned by lies. Margaret helped sell the property. The money went to a fund I established for victims of elder fraud, turning my grief into something useful. Something Robert would have approved. A week before the trial, I received an unexpected visitor. S. Williams showed up at the apartment, accompanied by a woman I didn't know, thin, in her 40s, with eyes that had seen too much suffering. Mrs. Jenkins, the sergeant said, this is Linda Patterson. She has information that, Well, that changes everything. Linda sat, her hands shaking, as she held a cup of tea I offered her. I don't know how to begin this, she said. But you deserve to know the truth, about Joseph, about everything. I already know the truth, I replied gently. He is the son of Thomas Jenkins, my husband's brother. No, Linda interrupted. He's not. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. What do you mean? Margaret leaned in. My name was Linda Hartley before I was married. 46 years ago, when I was 19, I got pregnant by a man I met in Nashville. He promised to marry me, then disappeared when he found out about the baby. I gave birth alone, tried to raise the child, but I couldn't. I was too young, too poor, too broke. She wiped away tears. I put the baby up for adoption through a private agency, a 3-year-old boy. But I lied on the birth certificate. I said the father was Thomas Jenkins, a name I made up, using the surname of a wealthy local family I knew. My heart started beating faster. Why? Because I thought that if the father seemed to come from a good family, someone better would adopt my son. I didn't know that Thomas Jenkins was a real person, much less a criminal. It was a terrible coincidence. So Joseph isn't the grandson of a criminal? Sarah asked, her voice full of hope. Biologically, no, but there's more. Linda took a deep breath. 3 months ago, when I saw the news about Joseph's arrest, something inside me broke. Decades of guilt came flooding back. I took a DNA test on his biological mother, confirmed, and after much searching, I found his father. She pulled a photograph from her purse. It showed a man in his 70s, smiling, wearing a white lab coat. Dr. Harold Kingston, she said, retired cardiovascular surgeon, philanthropist, married for 45 years, 4 children, 12 grandchildren, a decent man who made a mistake when he was young, abandoned me when I got pregnant. Did you talk to him? I asked. I did. He was shocked, but he wants to meet Joseph. He wants to try to build some kind of relationship, even with everything that happened. He said he always regretted running away, that he carried the guilt his whole life. Margaret was furiously taking notes. Does this change Joseph's defense? If he's not genetically predisposed to sociopathy, that doesn't change what he did, Linda said firmly. But it explains that it wasn't fate. Joseph made choices, bad ones, cruel ones, but not because he was born evil, because he chose to be evil. The revelation was like an earthquake, rearranging everything we thought we understood. Robert had carried unnecessary guilt. He had died believing he had brought a curse upon our family. But it was a lie. Joseph was not Thomas Jenkins's blood. There was no genetic predisposition to criminality. There's something else, Linda continued. Dr. Kingston wants to help Sarah financially with her treatment. He sees her as his granddaughter. He wants to make up for everything. He doesn't erase what Joseph did, but he offers Sarah a chance at a real family. Sarah was crying silently. Do I have a real grandfather? You do, Linda smiled through her own tears. And Grandma, his wife, Margaret Kingston, is a retired therapist specializing in family trauma. She offered to work with you for free. Have you discovered that the story you've carried for years was based on a lie? That the guilt you felt had no real basis? I sat in silence, processing. Robert had tortured himself, thinking he'd brought bad blood into our family. But Joseph was just Joseph. A man who made terrible choices, not because of genetic destiny, but because of character, in a way that was sadder. It meant the love we gave could have made a difference, but Joseph chose another path anyway. Will this be presented at trial? I asked. Joseph's defense attorney will use it, SGT, Williams said, arguing that he's not genetically predisposed to crime, therefore a lighter sentence. But honestly, Ms. Jenkins, with the evidence against him, it won't make much difference. The trial lasted 2 weeks. It was a circus media, onlookers, victims of Joseph and Rebecca, coming to testify. The list of horrors was endless. Clara Whitmore, the first victim, whose children testified as her mother languished in an unnecessary nursing home. George Morrison, who lost his life savings. Patricia Chen, who signed power of attorney under duress and woke up one day with nothing. And then, Rebecca's mother. Exhumation of the body revealed toxic levels of sedatives in her system, more than any doctor would legitimately prescribe. The cause of death was officially changed to homicide. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand with Sarah beside me in the gallery, supporting me. Mrs. Jenkins, the prosecutor began, can you tell us about the day you received the note from Dr. Bradford? I told them everything. The fear, the betrayal, the discovery of Robert's letters, the escape. Every word documenting how my family had tried to destroy me. And how do you feel about your son now? I looked at Joseph, sitting at the defense table. He didn't look back at me. I feel sorry for him, I said honestly. I feel sorry because he had everything: love, family, opportunities, and chose to throw it away for greed. I feel sorry because he will never know the peace that comes from living honestly. And I feel sorry because he will spend most of his life in a cell, paying for choices he didn't have to make. Do you forgive him? I'm trying. Not for him, but for me. Because carrying hate is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean a lack of consequences. It means freeing my own heart from the prison that hate creates. The defense attorney tried to paint me as abandoning my son in his time of need. But Morrison destroyed every argument with irrefutable evidence. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Joseph received 28 years. Rebecca, with an additional charge of murder, received life in prison with no possibility of parole for 35 years. When the judge banged the gavel, Sarah buried her face in my shoulder. Is it over? It's over, I confirmed. But it wasn't, because 3 days later, I received a letter from Joseph, handwritten on prison paper. Mother, I know I have no right to call you that. I know I don't deserve your attention. But I need to say something before I disappear. For decades, Dr. Kingston came to visit me, my biological father. He seems like a good man, the kind of man you deserved to raise, the kind of man I could have been. I won't blame genetics, or childhood, or any excuse. I made choices. Cruel, calculated, selfish choices. I saw you not as a mother who loved me, but as a source of money. I saw old people not as people, but as targets. I don't know when I broke. Maybe I've always been broken. But I know you didn't deserve what I did. Sarah didn't deserve it. None of my victims deserved it. I'll spend the next few decades in a cell thinking about this. And honestly, that's where I deserve to be. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect visits. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know. You were a good mother. The best any child could hope for. The problem was never you. It was always me. Joseph, I folded the letter slowly. It wasn't a proper apology. How could it be, after everything? But it was, something. Acknowledgement. Accountability. Maybe, Eventually it could be the beginning of redemption, or maybe it was just another manipulation. I would never know for sure. Sarah graduated from the rehabilitation program with honors. She started community college, studying social work. She wants to help other victims of family abuse. Twice a month, she visits the Kingstons. Dr. Harold and Margaret treat her like the granddaughter they've always wanted to meet. I moved into a small cottage near the river, a quiet place where I can watch the sunset every night. I have a garden now, with roses that Robert would have loved, and a cat, Mr. Whiskers, rescued from a shelter, who purrs on my lap while I read. I occasionally lecture on elder fraud. I've become, to my dismay, a minor celebrity in elder law circles. Margaret calls me an inspiration. I say I'm just a survivor who refused to be a victim. Dr. Bradford retired last month. At his retirement party, he approached me. "Have you ever regretted it?" he asked. "That I gave you that note." "Every day," I admitted. "And no day, because if you hadn't given it, I wouldn't be here, free, alive, at peace." And Joseph made his choices. He's paying for them. What about me? I'm finally living my life, not the life others wanted me to live. The foundation I established has already helped 13 seniors escape abusive situations. Each story is different. Some are greedy children, others exploitative caregivers, some external scammers, but they all end the same way, with the senior regaining dignity, autonomy, and peace. Sarah came over for dinner yesterday. She brought her boyfriend, a kind young man named Marcus, not the investigator, just a coincidence, who treats her with respect and tenderness. We made Robert's recipe, his famous beef stew, which he made on Sundays. "Grandma," Sarah said, using an old nickname that made me smile now instead of hurt. "You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong," I corrected. "I just refuse to be broken." Do you see the difference? Strength isn't about never falling. It's about deciding to get up every time you fall. Last night I opened Robert's Bible, the one I carry with me now, with his notes in the margins. I found the marked passage in Romans, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." All things, even betrayal, even pain, until discovering that the family he loved was built on lies. Because from those ashes, I built something new, something true. An honest relationship with Sarah, peace with myself, freedom to live without fear or guilt. Joseph sent me another letter last week. I haven't opened it yet. Maybe I will tomorrow, maybe never. But it's there, if I choose. And that choice, that autonomy, is something I almost lost. Sometimes, saving ourselves means cutting ties with the people we love. It means choosing truth over comfort. It means being called cruel, selfish, ungrateful, and doing the right thing anyway. I'm 73 now. Statistically, I don't have many years left. But the years I do have, they're mine. Truly, completely mine. And this freedom, this peace, this life lived on my own terms is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of pain I've gone through to get here. If you're watching this and recognize signs of abuse in your own life, whether you're an elderly person or a young adult, whether financial, emotional, or physical, know this: you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve dignity. And it's never too late or too early to ask for help. Subscribe to this channel, because in the next video, we'll explore stories of other grandmothers who found the courage to start over, and you'll learn warning signs that could save your life or the life of someone you love. Leave your comment below. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between family loyalty and your own well-being? How did you find the courage? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next diaries, where we share not just stories, but wisdom that only comes from weathering storms and choosing to flourish anyway. Because in the end, we are not defined by the people who betrayed us. We are defined by our choice not to let that betrayal define us.